Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of HeadCoachU. I am Bryan Fischer, joined as always by former BYU and Virginia head coach Bronco Mendenhall. And Bronco, if there was a Head Coach of the Year award honor that was handed out last season, I think chances are our next guest, Sonny Dykes of the TCU Horned Frogs, ended up taking it home. Sonny, thank you so much for jumping on with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
We'll get into a lot of the background, and certainly been a head coach at a number of different places. But I guess if you could just peel back the curtain for us a little bit in terms of what's the last couple of months been like after you make that run to the national title game.
You know, it's been crazy, honestly. You take over a program, and it's my fourth time to do it, which is a lot. Most of the time, there's not too many guys, I guess, that have done it four times. And so I was lucky to get a chance to come here to TCU. I felt like coming in, it was a great opportunity. I think it's a really great place to live. I'm from Texas, and it's really a special place. Not too many people understand how good of a place it is here. So anyway, came over, and it's always crazy. I mean, the first year is you truly just drinking out of a fire hose and trying to get as much done as you can. What helps is, again, having done it four times, and you do get a little better sense every time you do it, what's really important and the stuff that's not as important. And I think that's, the one thing we tried to do from day one really was say, okay, what's going to move the needle for our program? What's the most important things that we can accomplish? And it was all about the players. You know what I mean? I think it's sometimes our focus, we lose focus on all the different things, but we tried to put 100% of our attention and focus and pour everything we could into the players. And so that's what we did. And that was crazy. Just trying to build a relationship with those guys was really the first thing. Today's world is so different now because, your team used to be your team, and now your team is kind of almost rented. You feel like that they're yours today, but there's, you have these portal windows, and there's certain times of the year where you're basically kind of renting the players up until that point in some ways. And so anyway, we had some guys jump in the portal really before I even became the head coach. But our biggest thing that we tried to do was let's keep as many guys as we can. We had played TCU when I was at SMU. We felt like they had a lot of talent on the football team, and so our thought was let's try to keep as many of the pieces as we can. And so that was really our focus from the get-go, was get to know the players, build a relationship with those guys, share our vision for the program, and then the big thing, one big thing that I'm a big believer in is, we kind of laid out our plan. We said, here's what we want to do, and here's how we want to do it. And, oh, by the way, here's why these things are important. And here's how they're going to make you a better football player individually. And here's how they're going to make us a better team collectively. And I think today's young people, they need to know why. They're sophisticated, they're smart, they're worldly. And so I think it's important for them to understand why these things are important and how it's going to help them and how it's going to help us win together as a team. So anyway, that's kind of what we did. And then we finished up recruiting. And so that was kind of crazy. And then we went into spring ball. We really had some huge holes in our team. We had 5 scholarship D linemen that went through spring football last year. And so, we were in a dire situation on our defensive front. And we went out and found a couple of transfers, and then, we were fortunate. We found a true freshman nose guard that started 15 games for us this year, and I don't think he turned 18 until like the 10th game of the season. So he was starting for us as a 17-year-old. It was a heck of a player for us, and so we found those transfers, and then the thought at that point was, okay, look, we don't have a lot of depth. We're going to really need to take care of these guys. And we never practiced one time more than 18 periods the whole fall camp or in the season, just because we literally had no depth. And so we were going to have to make sure we didn't hurt ourselves in practice. And we got our players fresh, and the guys enjoyed it, and they started having fun and won a couple of games early and got a little confidence, and there it went. And so, that was kind of the season. And then the crazy thing about it is you have a little bit of a break leading up to the Fiesta Bowl, because we played in the Big 12 championship and lost to Kansas State, who was a really good football team. And then we had a little bit of time to kind of gather up a little bit of time to recruit. And then it was on to the Fiesta Bowl. And then, believe it or not, as soon as we win the Fiesta Bowl, we fly back here to Fort Worth, and we have official visits that whole week leading up to the national championship. So we had 5 transfers that came in that week while we're trying to get ready to play in the national championship game. So that ended, then directly into recruiting, and then finally got a break in February. So that first year was kind of crazy. We talked about as a coaching staff, just the way stuff fell, with the season being the way it is. We worked every single day from July 24th up until February 5th and never had a day off, and our everybody was worn out. And our players, it's pretty crazy. Our players, played January 9th, and then they had to turn around and come back to school the next week. So nobody got a break. And so the first thing we did is when the players came back, we gave the players a couple of weeks off and gave our coaches quite a bit of time off after signing day. And, we just needed to recharge a little bit. And anyway, rolled into spring ball. Felt like we had a good signing class. Got, filled in again with some transfers and had a good signing class, and then rolled into spring and thought we had a really good spring. And then of course back to transfer recruiting. That's kind of been going on now. And then we're finishing. Our coaches are finishing on the road this week. We'll have next week off. Everybody will have a little bit of time off, and then we'll hit the camp circuit hard. June 3rd and 4th, we'll have close to 5,000 kids on campus over those 2 days. We do those big camps, and we invite other staffs. And so we'll probably have 3,000 or close to 3,000 kids on Saturday and probably 2,000 on Sunday. And then, the camps during the week, and then recruiting official visits 3 weekends in a row. And then everybody will need another break after that. So that's kind of what's been going on. So a lot of stuff, but it's been a lot of fun. I mean, it's been one of those years that, what made it especially fun. Obviously, anytime you win games, it's fun, it's exciting. But what really made this year fun was we literally had no expectations. We thought coming out of spring that we might be able to make a bowl game. We thought 6-7 wins, maybe something we can do just with some of the depth issues we had. And then we got through fall camp and we kind of thought, 8 wins, 9 wins, if things fall into place. And, all of a sudden you looked up and we were 12-0. So real credit to our players. I mean, we just had a really special group of guys, had a ton of leadership. And then we had a quarterback that just kind of willed us to win some football games, and really had an opportune team that played well down the stretch in some key ball games. So it was a blast. It was a fun year. Things have changed now. We're riddled with expectations now, which I guess is a good thing. But, we'll learn how to all deal with that as a coaching staff, and most importantly as players, and see how we can do from here.
So after listening to and being reminded of what the life looks like of a head football coach, and especially a successful one, and especially one that, plays that many games. And so that cycle is amazing. What is it that you love about your job? The things that, I don't know, that you look forward to the most, the demand, the expectations, all those things are really challenging. What are the things you really love?
What I like is I love spring practice. You know what I mean? I love being on the grass with the players, just getting around, talking to guys. I love having players in my office and, just getting to know young people and trying to help them get where they want to go. It's funny. We were fortunate this year. We had 8 players drafted, and I've never coached anywhere where we had, I don't think, half as many in 1 year as we did last year. And so, so you have those guys that are kind of preparing for the NFL. And then you have these young guys that are trying that have those same aspirations. But then you also have 2/3 of your team, really probably 3/4 of your team, that those guys are just trying to figure out what's next in their life outside of football. And so, that's what I enjoy. I enjoy trying to work with the NFL guys and help them realize their dreams, but also try to put as much attention into those guys that are going to go on to be fathers and husbands and dads, and try to just be successful business people, and, try to have a good life and make the world better. And so that's what I like. And I love fall camp. I love watching a team come together. It's really fun when you start to see, leaders lead and followers follow, and people start to realize, their role. And that's the most exciting thing in some ways, is just watching a team come together. And it's really fun when it happens. We went on a little run when I was coaching at Louisiana Tech. We went on a run over 2 years where I think we won like 17 out of 18 regular season games, and over a 2-year span. And it was fun just watching those guys begin to believe in themselves, and and figure out that, hey, look, we can do this, and we're capable of a lot more together than we are individually, and just all those stuff that's kind of, in a weird sort of way, almost cliche, but that's what I really enjoy about the game. And this Bronco as a head coach, you don't really get to do as much X's and O's stuff. I mean, I miss going into a dark room on Sunday and, spilling this wall full of ideas, and waking up Monday morning and going in the office and realizing 90% of them are bad ideas. And so I miss those days. You don't really get to do that much as a head coach, just because, if you're sitting in your office by yourself, that's not a good thing. I mean, you need to have players and coaches and people and stuff in here, and you need to be communicating and trying to get a feel for your team. And the worst thing you can do is be in a dark room, I think, as a head coach. And so I do miss that part of it. I really did enjoy, game planning and trying to figure out how to make a first down and that kind of stuff. But that's probably just being around the kids and watching them figure stuff out and watching them grow up. I mean, that's what's really special, is when you can go someplace and be someplace for 4 years and watch people change. We had my first year at SMU, after my first year at SMU, we took a transfer kid named Reggie Robertson that, had been at West Virginia for a year and transferred to SMU, and his home was DFW. And, when you have a chance to watch somebody change from the time you get him to the time he leaves, as much as Reggie did, and, just getting to see guys do that. I mean, it's just really, really special. And, getting to see players, get married and have kids and become fathers and become friends. And, that's one of the things I always enjoy, is going to weddings. You go to your players' weddings and just, watching them grow up as much as anything else. I think that's probably as satisfying as anything, honestly.
One of the things you said earlier, it struck me when you talked about almost where you feel like your team is rented. The landscape of college football has changed significantly, and so the transient nature of players, much like it used to be, maybe with assistant coaches, there's a blurring of those lines now. I'm wondering, just as you think about that and leading, your team and in college football, man, what things are you targeting besides maybe just the depth of relationships with your coaching staff, and to try to hold on to your team as much as you can?
Yeah. You know what, Bronco? It's funny. I think, people ask me all the time, have you had to change? I don't know. I think I always felt like I was selling before to players anyway. You know what I mean? I don't know that we've changed much. Just because, I always believed that relationships are really important. I always believed that if the players, didn't believe that you cared about them off the field, then they weren't going to play for you. And they certainly weren't going to play for you when things got tough.
Yeah.
And, so I don't know that that's changed. I think that probably what you have to be now maybe is a little more proactive. One of the things I do every single day at practice is, I walk around and just look at players and guys that are standing in the back of the line and trying to hear what those guys are saying, or they're looking at their body language and how they're interacting with their teammates. And, and we try to be as forward thinking as we can, in terms of we don't want to be reactionary. We want to try to deal with those issues before they become issues. And so a lot of times, I'll tell a player at practice, hey, come by my office, see me, let's talk about what's going on. And, sometimes it's, hey, I'm thinking about maybe leaving, or I don't know about my role. And then other times it's, I got an issue with a class or a professor or a girlfriend or something going on at home. And so, I think that, the one thing that's different, I will say this, I think the one thing that's different with players these days, and I get asked all the time, and people assume that kids are different these days. And I don't really know that they're much different at all. I think they still want to be cared for, and they still want to be coached hard, and they still want expectations, and they still want consequences. And they believe in accountability. They really do want that. I think we all want that. But the one thing that seems like these kids do more than other kids in the past is they carry the problems of their parents, I think, more than kids used to. I think sometimes when a kid went off to college, they didn't have to answer the phone all the time, or they didn't have to, there wasn't communication all the time about what's going on at home. And what happens a lot of times now is our kids come to college and things are great. They're doing well in their classes, and they're playing football, and they're showing up, and they're working hard, and they love their teammates, and things are good. But a lot of times things aren't good at home. And with cell phones and the fact that you can, communicate with these kids nonstop, and sometimes these kids can't get away from those problems that they leave at those hometowns. And I think, they carry a heavy burden. They want to take care of their parents, and they want to take care of the people that have taken care of them for so long. But it's difficult to do sometimes because, they're a long way away from home, and they're trying to get their own life together. And it just seems like that happens more and more now with kids than it used to, about, hey, my mom's having these really tough issues, or I got this going on with my dad, or, and I think COVID probably contributed to that a little bit with some of the strain it put on some people financially. But anyway, that's, I think, one of the things that's different probably about today's world, maybe, than it was in the past.
It's interesting. And maybe one of the connecting points, which you said, is that the accessibility makes it harder for there to be that separation, knowing that the cell phones and the way social media is. And so sometimes a young man would go off to college, and there was a payphone, or there was, some way, and there were letters a long time ago.
Yeah.
Now the constant connectivity, I think, maybe facilitates what you're saying of them living in two places at the same time, where they're trying to kind of have their learning and growing and experience at college, but at the same time, on a daily basis, many times they still have the connection to the challenges at home, is what it sounds like.
Yeah. And I think you put it a really good way, kind of live in two places at once. I mean, I never thought of it in that terms, but really, I think that's kind of what a lot of these guys are going through, because, they really do, they obviously love the people that love them. And just like I said, it seems like more than anything now, these guys are just carrying the burden of their parents, in their lives and their struggles, and that probably more than they have in the past. And, as you said, obviously technology has so much to do with that. I mean, it's just hard to get away now. And these kids get pulled a million different directions. And I think that's new. You think about these guys now, and I mean, we have players on our team, and they might have, if you're a quarterback, you probably have a quarterback coach that you worked with. And chances are you worked with somebody in, strength and conditioning kind of outside your high school team as well. And then you have, your coaches you talk to, and then more than likely you probably, might have somebody who's trying to get involved in your NIL stuff. We have people all the time that are coming to our players now and are saying, hey, I want to represent you in NIL. And, these kids just don't know, what does that mean? I don't really know what that means. And so, that world is just different now than it used to be. These kids just have so many more influences on them maybe than they have in the past. And a lot of these guys played on 7-on-7 teams. So you have your 7-on-7 coach. And then, before long, there's just 5 or 6 adults that, are trying to take an active role in these kids and how they make decisions and what they're going to do. And sometimes it's hard for these kids to tell adults no. I'm 53 years old. I still have a hard time telling people no. And when you're 18 to 22, it can be really tough. And especially when, these guys have a vested interest in you. And so it's just a complicated thing now for a lot of these young people. And it used to be much more simple. It used to be your high school coach and your family were the two people that you really relied on and leaned on. And now, it's just, there's a lot of other players in the game all of a sudden.
There is, and it really challenging because a lot of times the most respectful and the kids that really want to please others and to do right by those that have helped them, they influence their decisions. And so, as you said, besides maybe one or two, now if that number grows to 5 or so, and what if those messages at times might not align with maybe your thoughts as the head coach, or maybe their coordinator or position coach, and something like you ought to be playing in this system, or they ought to be using you this way,
Right.
or those kind of things. And those create challenges, and it's really hard for a young person to perform at their best when the messaging isn't consistent. And as the head coach, I'm sure it's really challenging now with the different layers added to try to keep all that messaging unified.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, it is. It's hard too, because, all of those people, they're not here. They don't really know what's going on here. And sometimes, that chain of communication isn't that good between the player and what's going on. And then all of a sudden these guys are drawing conclusions based on things that they don't really know that much about. And so it's hard to figure out who's involved. The first rule of recruiting, figure out who the decision maker is, and who's going to give them guidance. Well, it's that way now, when it comes to these guys making decisions. And a lot of people, I always hate the semester breaks, because what happens is these young people go home and they get around a bunch of different people, whether it's family or whether it's, just different people that don't really know what their situation is and don't have any kind of understanding of it. And all of a sudden everybody starts, putting their 2 cents in. You ought to do this, you ought to do that, you ought to go to the transfer portal, you ought to think about transferring to this school, you need to get more, you should be getting more than you're getting, or whatever the case may be. And those kids down deep in their heart and soul, I mean, they kind of know what's going on, and they know that you're trying to take care of them, and they know that the guy in front of them is better, but then all of a sudden they go home and they hear from people that don't know that, and it convolutes their thinking, and all, you get these phone calls all the time from these kids that call and, well, I'm thinking about this, or I'm thinking about that. And you're just like, well, who have you been talking to? That's so far from reality and what's really going on. Look, you know how it is here. We care about you. We love you. We're developing you. You're getting better. You're on track. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do, and you got a great future. And sometimes these guys kind of lose their way, when they get a lot of voices in their head. And I think most of the time they're well-intentioned voices, but sometimes some of these folks have some skin in the game as well. And they're not always worried about just the player's well-being. They're trying to figure out, how they can get something out of it as well. So it's very, very complicated. And as you said, is really hard on the better the kid, it seems like the harder it is on them, just because they don't want to disappoint people, and they want to make them proud, and they're respectful, and it can be tough on those guys.
One of the words that I heard you say just a second ago, and sometimes at semester breaks, folks at home or others, the word should comes up. You should be this, or you should be that. Should leads pretty quickly to an entitlement mindset. And and it's a departure from the reality, as you were saying, of what really is real at school. And so sometimes when that should comes in over break, they come back with the should.
Yeah.
And their mindset
should creates all kinds of problems. It really does. I mean, it's, and again, most of the time these kids really know. I mean, they know kind of where they're at, and that's why they're comfortable with their situation. I mean, they all want to do better, and they all want more, and they all want to achieve higher than they are. And, but I think most of the time, they realize, okay, look, it's going to take some time, or, I'm on the path and I'm working hard, and this guy in front of me actually is better, or whatever the case may be. And so, that's the one thing that I try to do with our kids is, when they come in and they sit down, it's just be as blunt and honest and straightforward with them as you can be, and just say, look, here's where you are. Here's where this thing is. And, and look, it's going to be a process. And if you're not okay with the process, then, you got to do what you got to do. But you also need to understand when you go to another school, that process doesn't go away, that you're going to have to go through that same thing again, and you're going to go through it. It's going to be unfamiliar to you. There's going to be an adjustment. There's going to be a learning curve and growth and all that type of stuff. So at the end of the day, it's weird. People ask me all the time. I mean, I get asked, what do you think about the transfer portal? What do you think about NIL? I have mixed emotions on both of them, but I think at the end of the day, I think they're both good for players. I really do believe that. I believe the transfer portal is good for players because it allows somebody who made a mistake to rectify that mistake, and it may not even be a mistake. Circumstances may have changed. You have a change in coaching staff. You have a change in position coach. You have a change in scheme. You have a changing situation at home that you need to get closer to. You have all these things that are changing. And, I always felt like as coaches, we were allowed to evolve, and we were allowed to move up the ladder, and we were allowed to do those things. Why in the world would we not want our players to have that same opportunity? And so I do believe, in the transfer portal, and I do think it's about kids finding the right situation for them. I do wish that they would, or that we could teach them, how to persevere, and understanding that just changing schools isn't a solution. You still have the same problems when you go to that other school that you've had at this school. But sometimes they have to figure that out on their own. And I think some guys go make the most of those opportunities, and some guys go and don't make the most of them. And hopefully they learn a lesson from that they'll carry with them for the rest of their lives. And it's the same thing with NIL. Look, you hear about some of the numbers that some of these schools make, University of Texas making, $200 million a year in football or something crazy like that. Why in the world would you not want, the most important part of the equation, which are the players? Why would you not want those guys to share in that? And so I totally understand NIL. I think that, people do own their name, image, and likeness, and they should be able to gain an advantage or monetize it. But the two of them together, when you put NIL and you put the transfer portal together, that's to me where you have problems. And I think some of the things that are going on now in college football are a result of those two things converging at the same time. And like I said, it's the unintended consequences that we all are trying to figure out what's best for the game of football. But sometimes, we have these consequences that aren't what they think they're going to be. And I don't know that any of us saw name, image, and likeness in the transfer portal, becoming like free agency. And that's really what it is. And, and that's unfortunate. I don't think that's good for the game of football. And I think at the end of the day, it's probably not good for kids. Just because I'm seeing kids all the time that are, leaving situations where they're really happy and they're doing well and they're on the right track to go to another situation that they don't really know anything about, for money. And that money can be really short-lived. And then oftentimes we're finding out now that a lot of these promises aren't being kept, which is really a sad statement on adults and some of the things now that's happening in college football. So anyway, it's an interesting time to be a coach, and probably even a more interesting time to be a player.
Yeah, lots of challenges. And I think what you just mentioned was a great point. The force multiplier of NIL and the transfer portal at the same time, both underformed and maybe underregulated and understood.
Exactly.
But both launched in a collection together. I think that force multiplier exacerbated the things that kind of had led to now. And the other thing you talked about, when you visit with players and how transparent you are talking to them about their role or developing, but then this other word that comes out, and time, like it does take time. And so when you put those force multipliers together and then you say it does take time, and then teaching, like you said, the perseverance or resilience, there's a friction point there of just leaving to do the next thing that they don't really know, or truly investing in being developed. And that does take time, and then sorting out the truth and all that, I think is probably one of your head coaches and your seats hardest jobs, right? Is to help them see the plan for them, to make sure they know this is going to work, and they have a part in that too. Versus just, I shouldn't say just, versus leaving for another place. And I used to have similar conversations with assistant coaches, and so it seems like those conversations are happening now, just with a little less maturity and a different group of people, but a lot of the same messaging.
Yeah. And I do think, Bronco, one of the things that's interesting, in today's world is like, and your background's similar to mine. I mean, look, you've coached at places that historically, have been difficult places to win. I mean, you've had we haven't coached at Alabama and in Texas and places like that. I mean, those are, and so when you're at a place, like a BYU or Virginia or the places I've been, a Louisiana Tech, an SMU, a Cal, those are difficult places. And, part of what you have to do at those places is you have to be really good at player development. You know what I mean? You got to find guys that fit what you're doing. And I always thought that's what you did such a good job of at BYU was, you knew what you wanted those players to look like, and you knew the kind of guys you could get being at BYU, and you could build your team around those kind of guys. And we've had to do the same thing. I mean, when I went to Louisiana Tech, we had to find speed, because we were in Louisiana, and we could find a lot of guys that could run. And so we kind of built our team around being really fast, and then we had to try to get really big, and that was going to take some time.
Yep.
But we could get fast quickly. But anyway, that's kind of goes back to that same thing with the players and coaches, really, for that matter, is what happens today is, I think in today's world, these players all have friends. And I think somehow probably from my generation, to kind of the new generation, the younger generation, we all kind of had the same path. In other words, you went to work someplace, you proved yourself, you moved up, you proved yourself, you moved up, you proved yourself, you moved up. And I think what happened was all of a sudden in the world, really, young people started to know guys that graduated from college and went to work at some startup. And 2 years later, they're making $1 million, and where, we're 5 years into coaching, I was making $4,000 a year at Navarro Junior College. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that's, it changes people's expectations. And I think when they know people and they have people in their family that have had this really, really kind of quick success, and they've had a substantial, quick financial windfall, then I think these young people, whether it's, kids in college or whether it's college athletes or whatever it may be, they start to think, well, why can't I do that? And so I think there's a different mindset. And I do think that, kids these days, they want things fast. And it's because they see adults get things fast, and I think that's different. And I think we've got to, as coaches, that's really not how football works for the vast majority of people. It's a developmental game. And there's some guys that are so talented, they walk through the front door and, they just get it, and they're bigger, stronger, faster, and have a better feel than other people. But most of the time, and again, especially at places we've coached at, it's about developing. It's about, hey, look, there's a formula here. You got to follow the formula, and you have to do all these things right. And then all of a sudden, if you do those things right, then you know what? You have a chance. Yeah. It's not guaranteed. You just have a chance. And now, you're going to be given that opportunity, and now you got to go continue to do better and better and better. And it's like we told our team every week this year, hey, congratulations on the win. That's great. That's what you're supposed to do. But guess what? You have to work harder. You just hit your quota. And you know what? When you hit your quota goes up. And now you got to figure out how to continue to do better and better and better. And I do think that is, again, our job is to teach young people that, look, everybody wants this to be easy and everybody wants it to happen fast. But for the vast majority of us, me included, it's going to take a long time, and it just did. And if guys will see that and understand that and think big picture, then I think most of the time they're going to, make decisions that I'm hoping will benefit them in the long run. And at the end of the day, that's really what you want.
Yeah, there's so much in there that I just listened to you say that it's powerful. And one of the challenges we all face is self-assessment. And sometimes we think we are the person that's the bigger, stronger, faster. And as you pointed out, I love the developmental process. It's also where I've coached most of my career.
Yeah.
And I'm most fulfilled by seeing the guys that come in that have worked so hard, so long, and become. I loved watching that process. And in a way, I reflect that much like you. Snow College for $4,500 is where I started training horses the rest of the year to kind of make it work. And I cherished those times. I was just the commencement speaker back at Snow College. And I got all emotional. I could hardly talk just because I was so thankful for the challenge. And somehow it'd be really nice to help these kids be thankful for the challenge of becoming. And so many of us, even grown-ups, we don't self-assess accurately. And that's a tricky thing, because if you don't really see yourself how you truly are, it's hard to get better, but you also think you might be entitled to more or it's somewhere else. And that's kind of what I heard you talking about.
Yeah. And I think that's right on the money. I think, in a weird sort of way, it's like you almost feel sorry for those guys that are so good, and it's so easy for them, because it's, I think the one thing that, when you have a magical season like we had this past year, and like I said, you wake up one day and you go, we're 12-0, and how in the world did we get here? It means more to me because, I was 1-11 my first year at Cal.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I almost feel bad for those guys in the profession that have been, fortunate and blessed enough to have only had success. And I think I was that way, really honestly, till I got to Cal. I'd been at Navarro Junior College, we won. I'd been at Kentucky, we won. I'd been at Texas Tech, we won. I'd been at Arizona, we won. I'd been at Louisiana Tech, we won. And in all those places, it was kind of like we won bigger than they had ever won before. Right. And it's because we had a bunch of good players. But then all of a sudden you get someplace and you go, whoa, what happened here? How did this happen? And so it's good though, because it does I'm thankful for that 4 years I was at Cal and how much I learned. And what I get to do now is I get to enjoy the wins probably more than I would have had I not been through that. And, and I talk about it all the time, with kids and raising kids and, just the importance of your kids working hard, and earning something. I'll never forget when I was 12 years old, I used to push the lawnmower from door to door to door and ask people hey, I'll cut your grass for $5. Okay. Well, I remember at the end of that summer, I had like $150 saved. And so I remember going to the mall, and what I wanted was a Sony Walkman so bad. And they had those sport Sony Walkmans that were yellow in the case.
Yeah, I know exactly what that is.
Yeah. And so that's what I got. I went and bought a Sony Walkman, and I bought the Prince 1999 tape. That was my big thing. And so I'd saved all summer to buy those. And, at the end of the day, every day I used to go get a Q-tip and alcohol and clean off the heads of the player on the Walkman. And I got a lot of joy from having that Walkman. And I still have it, believe it or not. It still works. This is 40 years later. But I got a tremendous amount of joy from that because I worked hard for it, and I knew every time I listened to the tape, what I put into it. And so I think that, man, I hate it for young people sometimes when we give them all these things and they don't really get the joy that comes from working hard and really investing their time and taking care of something and watching it grow, and watching it, I think sometimes like I said, I almost feel sorry for those folks and some people in our profession. Some coaches have been in these places and, they've been at historically good programs and they're really fortunate to have been at those. And, but I think at the end of the day, they're probably more relieved when they win football games than they are happy. And I do think that is the one thing that I try to be, is just happy. Try to go in the locker room, really celebrate with our players. And, look, we all feel the pressure or whatever in football, and it's a hard way to make a living. But, to me, my perspective is a lot different than it used to be. I'll never forget when I was at Cal one year, we went to Texas and we beat Austin. We went to Austin and we beat Texas. And my third year at Cal. And so we go in there and, I grew up, my dad coached at Texas. I grew up on that field when I was a kid, playing football there in the 70s. And, our neighborhood kids would load up and we would go to Memorial Stadium and we'd have these football games on Sundays, with 25 neighborhood kids at the football stadium. So that place meant a lot to me. It was pretty special. So we won the game there. And, my dad was there. He lived right down the road outside of Austin. And I'll never forget, the game is counting down. I'm getting ready to walk across the field to go shake Charlie Strong's hand. And I'm about 2 steps over there. And I'm thinking, man, we got to go on the road next week and play Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to the locker room. My dad was like, boy, don't you feel great? And I just was like, yeah, but we got to go play Washington next week and this and this and this. And he was like, man, you don't get it. Yeah. He goes, I'm gonna tell you something right now that you need to know is you've been working your whole life to win this game and to have a chance to do what you did tonight. Enjoy it, celebrate it. Don't worry about what's next, and put it in perspective. And anyway, he said, look, if you're not going to get joy from coaching, don't be in this profession. And so it's a real good reality check for me, and I think that's the one thing I've tried to do ever since then is really celebrate the games and enjoy them and be present, with the players and with my family after the game. And then we'll worry about what's next on Sunday.
It's a powerful lesson and really hard to do. So many of our colleagues, and in the time that I've paused, have reached out and said, to your point, I'm just relieved when we win. And the expectations are really high. The pressures are great. But the perspective is needed. And kind of back to your point of the journey that we've taken, I think we cherish the things that we've earned. And when you go through that process and joy doesn't accompany the accomplishment, that's a time to self-assess and to reassess. Number one, why are we doing it? And for whom? And going back to, I remember your time at Cal, and I was at BYU, and I felt kind of a kinship at that time, just as I was just watching and seeing struggles and growth and transformation of a program and what that takes and knowing what that takes. And there's something to be said about that process. And now that, man, at TCU and so early that there is success, I think what it sounds like is there's just been a really strong emphasis to not forget the process, what it took, and then to really feel grateful and happy that it is happening and knowing how fragile that is, because in our profession, any given year, it can go so many different ways, and that margin is pretty thin.
Yeah. You were kind, Bronco. Y'all came to Berkeley and put a pretty good little beat down on us my second year there. So if we won that game, we would have gone to a bowl game too. I'm still mad about that.
There you go.
So I remember is I think Goff was the quarterback and he threw for like 5 million yards, and the game went into either 1 or 2 overtimes. I don't remember hardly anything other than at the end, I was happy, but I can't say I didn't feel relief. The relief creeped in for sure.
Yeah, it was a heck of a game. Like I said, it was my second year there, and you guys were good, man. And it goes back to what I said earlier. What I thought you guys always did such a great job of was, you had these players that you had these long athletic linebackers, and your defense was built to free those guys up and let them run sideline to sideline. And just was always real impressed. Just thought you did a tremendous job of, realizing who you were and what you were going to have and building around your strengths. And you had big offensive linemen, and you played the physical brand of football, and just always had a ton of respect for, the way you built out your team and your program, and, the way you guys played. Y'all always played really hard. And like I said, not to get off on the subject, but I really thought I was real impressed with the way your guys played and the way you guys coached.
I appreciate it. I've got one other question that I think our listeners and things that I'm experiencing now, which is I feel really lucky. so in between your time at Cal and SMU, because that's kind of part of the coaching profession, right? There are times where, for various reasons, there could be breaks, there could be ups, there could be downs, there could be in betweens. And I'm wondering the influence maybe that year between Cal and SMU, in the time, I think you were an analyst at TCU, maybe.
I was, yeah.
I'm wondering just like how that was formative in your process, because I think it'll probably be good for others to hear, because things aren't always just seamless and smooth for everybody.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, so year 3 at Cal, we had a really good football team. Went to a bowl game, won a bowl game, had the first pick in the NFL draft. Really kind of felt like that we were, headed to a good place. We were recruiting better. We'd had some academic issues that we had inherited, and all our issues were fixed. We'd fixed. We were 922 APR and had gone from 922 to 1,000, and really had done some of the things that we wanted to do. But it's funny, the one thing I did learn, Bronco, that I think was a really good lesson for me is, we were so bad when I first got there. Mm-hmm. It's those things are, when you kind of have that approach and you kind of tear a program down to a degree, to rebuild it. And that wasn't really our intent. I mean, we weren't trying to go 1-11, but what happens is when you do that, there's a certain amount of people that at that point just kind of say, you know what, this guy can't do it.
Exactly.
That you never win those people back. And I do think that was part of what happened to us at Cal is we were so bad early, and we got, we go 1 win, 5 wins, I think 9 wins, maybe third year, 8 wins, that you kind of, you feel like you're headed in the right direction, but it's like people just can't forget, the way it started. And so anyway, it was good for me to I got fired after my fourth year. We went 5-7, and really felt like we had the best personnel that we ever had there, and felt like the team was really kind of headed to a good place. It got fired, which again, I don't blame Cal for firing me. I felt at that point that wasn't necessarily the right place for me, and I was trying to leave, and so they were more than happy to give me what I wanted, and send me out the door. And so they did that, and at that point, it's like, okay, what do I do now? And I tried to be really intentional about what was next. And for me, I was 35 years old before I got married, and that was intentional. I wanted to be able to pick up and move and go places and work my way up the ladder as a coach as quickly as I could. And so, I didn't get married until later in my life, and I hadn't been great about making decisions based on my wife and my family. And so what I decided to do at that point was, look, I'm going to do something for my wife and kids, and I'm going to get back to Texas. I'm going to be close to my father, but most importantly, I'm going to be close to my wife's parents and her family and her friends, and do something for her. And then obviously I was fortunate enough to have a chance to come work for, one of the best coaches in college football, and that was Gary Patterson. And it was great for me because I'd kind of cut my teeth under offensive coaches, Hal Mumme and Mike Leach. And now I got to go see how a guy that was going to approach the game much differently than they did. And so it was a really, really good learning experience for me. And what happens is, in those situations, the biggest problem when you don't have that success is all of a sudden you lose your confidence. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm sitting there going, what did I do wrong? How did I screw this up? Yeah. What, I'm not a good coach. What's part of, and I think that, I'm probably harder on myself. I think I probably you always need to look in the mirror and address yourself first. And sometimes I think that I'm not very good on moving on from me to somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, so I needed a confidence boost, and I came here, and we went 11-3 the year I was here, and we played in the Big 12 championship, and we had a ton of success, and I learned a lot. And Gary's approach was so much different than mine had been. And it was a great experience. And so, but I took two things from that, really. I took, number one, I was on the right track, because Gary and I are way different in the way we approach the game, but we both believe in the same fundamental things. You know what I mean? And that's, accountability and guys playing hard and effort. being fundamentally sound and all that type of stuff. And so I got to learn that I wasn't that far off. And then the second thing, which turned out to be really valuable, is I got to see what a great place TCU was.
Yeah.
I had no idea what this place was like. I hadn't been here much. I hadn't been around much. And so I got to get here and see, man, Fort Worth's a great town. Wow, you're in the middle of DFW. You can recruit kids from all, across East Texas and Louisiana and Central Texas really want to come to TCU. And man, there's a great administration here. And wow, they're really committed. And, the student body's awesome. And so I got to learn all this stuff. And where I was like, wow, if Coach Patterson ever retires or something happens there, then that'd be a heck of a place to go. And so, those were the things that really I took from that as much as anything else. And so it was a really valuable year. I learned a lot. The thing I enjoyed probably the most was just being able to walk into a room and sit in the back of the room.
Yeah.
And just not have to be in charge. And I really enjoyed that. It was really, I got to learn and listen. It's amazing how much more you can learn when you're not the one talking. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't say much. I just sat in the back of the room. I listened and tried to soak in as much knowledge and as I could. And, it was a really valuable year, because of that.
Just fascinating story. And two things as I listened so intently is the renewal that happened, but also the validation. And I already knew from a competitor standpoint and watching at Cal, I saw tremendous growth and progress. And I also knew how difficult it was, but that program was, the trajectory was upward, and it was upward pretty fast. And sometimes the record 5-7 and 9-3, there's not much difference. And those teams that you were building there, anyone could see the progress that was being made. But sometimes as coaches, and we're hard on ourselves, there needs sometimes just a pause. And with what I've been saying is with distance comes clarity. Just 1 year of distance by being in the back of the room, not the front.
Yeah.
All that perspective, especially, and then when your family is happier, being renewed after a pretty significant jaunt already in the coaching profession, it seems like that really framed chapter 2 well. And then here comes SMU, and then now the same coach, right? But maybe the 2.0 version at TCU, which many of us are working to become, is just now the even better than what he already was.
For sure. And going through that was hard. I mean, nobody wants to get fired, and nobody, wants to, as I said earlier, you've kind of been lucky enough to have a lot of success, and you kind of start going, well, what did I do wrong? And, but I do think that there's a million things I did wrong. And I think that's what was great is you got to learn from all those, and you got to say, well, look, if I get this opportunity again, here's what I'm going to do different. And so you learn so much from it. And it ends up being such a blessing. I mean, it's so strange. There was a time in my life where I was really kind of angry and all that stuff. And it's like, now I look back on that 4 years and I'm like, some of the best years of our lives. We got to, see and experience things that we would have never been a part of in the past. And you get to learn so much. And it goes kind of back to what we said earlier. You learn from pain and from suffering and from difficulty. But you also have to make sure that you also learn from a year like we had this year when you go 13-2, because look, we understand. I promise you, I know this. We don't have it figured out. You know what I mean? We are a long way from having it figured out. I know how fortunate we were to win some of those games that we won last year. I don't think that we're sitting over here going, look, we're smarter than everybody else or any of that. I mean, I think just goes back to what you said. I mean, it's a very fine line between 8-4 and 12-0. Yeah. And we were fortunate that we made plays in some really, really close ball games to get ourselves there, because, we weren't the kind of team that was just going to show up and freak everybody out with our athleticism. We had good players, but we were going to have to, play winning football in order to win. And we had to play well. We really did. I mean, the thing with us, we played really, really well 14 of the 15 weeks. And the one time we didn't play well was in the national championship game. And what a sorry time to not play well, but we had to. I mean, look, if we didn't play well against Tarleton State week 2, we would have gotten beat. I mean, we just weren't good enough to not play well. you got to give our players credit. I mean, they really did. They played hard and they never gave up and they believed in each other. And it was just a magical year. But again, I do think and hope that we are smart enough as a program to know that, look, we were also very fortunate to be in the situation that we were.
Well, it's as I listened to the discrepancy or the difference between 1-11 your first year at Cal, and I was 2-10 at Virginia the first year, and that's I learned as much or more. And to say that didn't affect confidence, it can in anybody, including the stakeholders, and sometimes you never get them back, yep. Even if the program excels, and sometimes that's just part of learning and growing. But then I think that's why I enjoyed your season as much as I did, is because of the lessons learned through success along the way. And there's a really cool definition of a level 5 leader, which is the highest level. And they're this combination of humility and will. And so just as you said, after a fantastic season, what I heard you say is you don't have it figured out. And I think that the best leaders, there's the humility, but also will and confidence at the same time. And they can all exist at the same time. It's not one or the other. And so I think the leaders like what you're doing and the success you've had that still understand that fine line and humility, and they don't have it figured out, I think understand just where the margins really are. And so here comes the next season, and here comes the new expectations, and the players are lucky to have you with kind of the perspective. And I think one of the things that I'm going to take away from this podcast, maybe more than anything, and for our listeners, is joy. When joy is appropriate and when you've accomplished something hard, to pause and enjoy and to celebrate wildly and appropriate, and to set aside a place for that rather than just but we're on to the next one. And that's not okay. And it's not a way to stay in life.
And I do think that when you do kind of celebrate that joy, I think it does refuel you. And I think it does fill your heart. Totally. And I think we all need that. You know what I mean? Because if we don't, then, it's just joyless trudge through life. And where at the end of it all, I mean, the only thing you're worried about is the scoreboard. And I don't know that that's necessarily, the way I want to be judged, and certainly not how I want our players to be judged, because there's so much more to it than that. And we all know we're in a bottom line business, don't get me wrong, but there is a lot more to take from what we're doing than just winning and losing on Saturday. And I think that if you can understand that and put that into perspective, then it's going to give you an opportunity to do all the things you have to do as a head coach and as an assistant coach, and also to have fun, and get to do it and enjoy coming to work every day and appreciate the blessings that you have. And I think that's, it refuels all of our hearts when we can do that a little bit. It makes us, better coaches, but I think more importantly, it makes us better husbands and parents as well.
Well, just really appreciate your perspective, and also taking time, as we already heard what your schedule is like. And for our listeners, it's hard to even fathom that, but just that you took time to share and help others, we really appreciate it. And man, just continued success. Really
thanks,
fun.
Bronco. Really appreciate you guys. A real blessing to have a chance to visit with you, and maybe we'll do it again sometime.
That's fun. All right, Brian, over to you.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do that, Sonny, and we certainly appreciate the time, and best of luck next season. I know you guys are kicking it off on big new kickoff on Fox against Colorado, so excited to see how the next edition of your teams get going, but we appreciate the time. For Sonny Dykes, for Bronco Mendenhall, I am Bryan Fischer. Thanks for joining us here on this episode of Head Coach U.